Alright, today I'm out at Merwin Lake doing early season kokanee. The kayak fishermen can actually access this fishery best from December through maybe early May, when the fish are feeding in the top 30 feet of the lake. As the water warms up, the kokanee start to drop down deeper, and you'll need things like a downrigger to get to them, and most kayak anglers don't have that sort of equipment on their boat. So it's a great opportunity to get out and enjoy this fishery. It doesn't take a whole lot of fancy equipment, since the fish are right up on top of the lake and easy to access. Since these fish hook themselves, there's no need to set the hook. You simply just lift the rod out of the rod holder and reel very gently. They have very soft mouths, so it's easy to rip the hooks out of their mouth. So just a slow and consistent reel with a soft drag will result in more fish being put in your boat. When trolling for kokanee, you want to use pretty slow speeds. They generally like the lure speed to be somewhere between 1 and 1.5 miles per hour. But it's good to vary that speed up and down, and I think that's a great advantage that kayak anglers have over those fishing from power boats, is that our speeds tend to vary naturally because of the way we paddle or pedal our boats. But try and maintain that speed. Anything over 1.5 miles per hour is generally a little too fast for these fish. And also be sure and zigzag your boat. You can run 2 rods at Merwin Lake with a 2-rod endorsement, and by zigzagging you'll naturally vary the speed of your gear. The inside rod, the lures will drop, and oftentimes you'll get hit on that drop, but occasionally you'll pick up a fish as the rod on the outside accelerates in a turn. So for terminal tackle when trolling for kokanee, my typical setup is a dropper weight, or a dropper, like a sliding weight rig system on my main line, followed by a bead, a chain swivel, and then I need about 1 foot to 16 inches of 10-pound mono to my flasher or dodger. In this case, I like these small cone zone flashers with the offset, and then I'll run 12 to 16 inch leader to a hoochie spinner, which consists nothing more of 2 snelled number 4 hooks, or a small treble hook on the back, a small number 3 Colorado blade, and then a small hoochie. And I'll tip that with fire corn. You can also use, besides fire corn, you can just use shoe peg corn soaked in tuna oil from a tuna can, and that works great. And I also put a little bit of krill on there as well, from the Atlas Mike's krill lunker lotion. It stays on there great, and the kokanee seem to really like it. So the other setup I like to use, besides the cone zone setup, is a similar sliding weight system up front, followed by the bead chain. That leads to a Shasta tackle sling blade. I like this UV pattern, followed by a 24-inch leader to a wiggle hoochie, which is really just a normal hoochie that has this little insert plastic bill that causes it to dive and wiggle and move erratically. And this really will draw out the kokanee that are a little bit unwilling to bite later in the day. They really seem to go for these wiggle hoochies, so I like them quite a bit. And then typically, if I'm flatlining them, I'll just run them about 100 feet behind the boat, 90 to 100 feet. Or, alternatively, I can add cannonball weights to that sliding weight rig on the front, anywhere from a ½ ounce to 1 ounce, to get my gear down further if I'm marking a lot of fish further down, closer to 30 or 40 feet. Especially later in the season, in April and May, they start to drop. So when trolling at Merwin, I like to use line counters so that I can set my gear back to the same spot that I got bit before, especially if I'm running weights. I want to make sure I'm getting down to that same depth that I got hit on the previous time. And also, because I'll be running 2 rods, it's nice to have 2 rods with line counters, because then you can have both of your flashers or dodgers at about the same distance behind the boat, so it looks like a little school of feeding kokanee behind you. So the 2 setups I'm using today for kokanee is an Okuma SST kokanee rod. This rod is rated from an 1/8 of an ounce to 3/4 of an ounce. It's a really great, affordable rod, very flexible. I got the Daiwa AccuDepth spooled with 10-pound mono. So combined with the stretch of the mono and the super flexibility of these kokanee rods, it helps to absorb the motion of these fish. They go just crazy when they get hooked. They're jumping and bouncing all over the place, and they have very soft mouths, so it's easy for the hook to fall out. So it's good to have all that stretch and bend in the rod to help absorb all that energy. The other rod I'm using today is a Jared Johnson Lamaglass kokanee rod. It's rated 1/8 of an ounce to 1/4 ounce. It's very flexible. I'm using it with a convector, an Okuma convector, and also spooled with 10-pound mono. I'll use a little bit lighter mono, like 6 to 8 pound on my terminal gear, just in case I do snag on something, but it's pretty rare that you do, because you're typically fishing over depths of 60 to 100 feet when fishing at Merwin. It's not uncommon to get several hits before these kokanee actually hook themselves. In the kayak, you can slow down or speed up, and oftentimes that will trigger a bite. There's no need to set the hook on these fish, as they generally hook themselves, so when you hook a fish, just lift it out of the rod holder and start reeling it in. Early in the season, these fish will average smaller, 11 to 13 inches in size, and as you get later into the spring, that average size will increase closer to 13 to 14 inches in size. They are among the best tasting freshwater salmon in the Pacific Northwest, and they are delicious baked, fried, grilled, and also make a very delicious smoked salmon as well. As with all our kayak fisheries in the Pacific Northwest, be sure to wear your PFD and prepare yourself for immersion in the cold waters. Have a safe and enjoyable time out on the water.